Monster Jam not crushing cars anymore is the biggest reason the show is on the decline. And before everyone jumps in and yells safety or cost cutting, you're not wrong. Those are a part of it, but not the whole story. This didn't happen because of one decision or the scary failed villain. It was a stack of operational, legal, logistical, and financial pressures together that erased the most iconic visual in the sport. So today we're breaking down why crush cars really disappeared, what replaced them, and whether there's a realistic way to bring back that old school feeling without having to turn every show into a Crash Madness DVD. And by the end of this, I'm going to show you 6 solutions that could bring crush cars back without blowing up the entire model Feld has right now. And I've got to tell you, I'm really excited to share them with you. If you grew up on Monster Jam, you remember the insane stacks of crushable objects lined up across the course in different layouts, and the excitement of looking at each new track design and imagining what kind of chaos was about to unfold. Also, one more thing, if you are an OG Monster Jam fan, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button right now. We would greatly appreciate it. Whether they were cars, vans, buses, campers, boats, and even planes, they were all getting absolutely, as we like to say on this channel, yard sailed. Now it's mostly dirt ramps, shipping containers, and skill maneuvers. For the record, I'm not as mad at skill maneuvers as I was in this video right here. I admit, seeing Monster Jam in Orlando this year was definitely exciting. However, as I pointed out in that video, the entire show feels sanitized. So what really happened to crushable objects? I think I heard the creator Critical Creeper use the term crushable objects, and I really liked it. Monster trucks didn't become famous because of backflips. They became famous because they were actually monster, literally driving over and crushing cars that you could see yourself riding in to get around town. Crushing cars goes way back to 1980 when the King Kong monster truck flattened cars in a field and later at Great Lakes Dragway. In 1981, Bigfoot followed. Then in 1982 at the Pontiac Silverdome, Bigfoot crushed 2 cars in front of a packed stadium, and that moment is widely considered the birth of car crushing as a stadium spectacle. That's the foundation. Crushing cars is what built Monster Jam, not choreographed skill moves on dirt ramps. Even racing felt different. It wasn't just straight line speed, it was how hard you hit the cars to get to the finish line faster. That's where that ragged edge style really originated, in my opinion. Then when freestyle was introduced in the 1990s, crush cars amplified individuality. Drivers attacked them differently. Some would hit them fast and straight on, some came with a more calculated approach, and some would let it all hang out and cross-thread the stacks by hitting them at various angles that made for some of the most unforgettable moments in the sport. Car stacks were not engineered for consistency, however, dirt ramps are. Crush cars did 3 things at once. They made the trucks feel massive, they created unpredictability, and they gave the sport a visual identity you could not mistake. And, let's be real, it just felt right. But then the world changed. I want to give credit to a creator named Samson MT Fan. He created a video called "Why Did Monster Trucks Stop Crushing Cars?" and he lays out the reality in more detail, facts, and less opinions than I do here. One of his key points is simple. Modern cars are not built like they were in the 80s and 90s. Back then, crush cars were mostly heavy steel that bent and folded in predictable ways. Today's vehicles use far more plastics, composites, and lightweight materials. Instead of metal collapsing cleanly, you get snapping parts, shattering plastics, and sharp fragments turning into flying debris. In a packed stadium or arena, that is a genuine safety concern. On top of that, modern vehicles are awkward shapes for crushing. Most cars today are some sort of crossover SUV, not a low, flat sedan like the old days. Historically, SUVs weren't ideal because the hood sits lower than the roof, which can pitch a monster truck left or right at an awkward angle. Pickup trucks weren't great either since the cab could high center the truck, which has happened plenty of times. Older sedans crushed flat and predictable, whereas modern vehicle shapes do not work as well. So when people, including myself, say Monster Jam removed crush cars because they got lazy or cheap, that's not the full picture. The supply got worse, the risk went up, and in a world full of lawyers and lawsuits, that matters. Here's something the Bring Back Crush Card crowd doesn't like to admit, including myself. Monster Jam isn't a local show that runs once a month. They run multiple tours every weekend almost all year. If they wanted to crush cars like the old days, they wouldn't need a few cars. They need a bulk supply of consistent shapes and sizes week after week. And the reality is, the cars that crush well are disappearing. The older sedans that were long, flat, and symmetrical are becoming rare. Vehicles today last much longer than they used to, so today you're far less likely to find a 2008 camper or van sitting in a junkyard because many of them are still on the road or being resold on a used car lot. Back in 2006, finding a 1988 camper or van ready for scrap was much more common, simply because vehicles didn't have the same lifespan as they do now. There's even an argument that during the early 2000s, Monster Jam may have been consuming good stock faster than it was being replenished, which would naturally drive prices up. Another argument to be made is that if Monster Jam did start buying up all the crushed car supplies, then the independent shows couldn't get their hands on any. Not sure if I fully agree with that, but it is worth a thought. So even if they wanted to bring back crushed cars at scale, the supply chain today is likely far more complicated than most fans, including myself, realize. Now let's talk about what really fuels most of this issue: liability. People have been seriously injured at monster truck events, and while most debris historically comes from the truck themselves, body panels, fiberglass, broken parts, crushed cars do introduce an additional debris variable that's far harder to control, especially with modern vehicle construction like we were just talking about. When you're running a massive corporate operation with national tours and major stadium contracts, you don't think like a local promoter. You think in terms of insurance premiums, legal exposure, venue requirements, reputational risk, and whether the format can be repeated safely week after week. Even if crushed cars can be done safely most of the time, corporations don't operate on most of the time. They operate on what consistently reduces risk, and from that perspective, crushed cars are unpredictable. Another piece from Samson MT Fans' video that I was shouting out earlier is this. Allegedly, many venues, dirt suppliers, and equipment rental companies don't want fiberglass, fluids, sharp debris, or small plastic fragments mixed into the dirt because it creates cleanup nightmares and increases the risk of animals or staff getting injured later at places like sporting events, fairgrounds, or a rodeo ground. Some places treat the dirt like a resource. They use it again. They do not want it contaminated. I know for a fact Jeep Beach, hosted at the Daytona International Speedway, stores all the dirt, rocks, and logs used for the event and reuses the same supply year after year. So I can imagine most stadiums operate on a similar system. So even if Monster Jam wanted to do classic crush cars, a venue can simply say, no, not in our building. So if enough venues say no, it makes sense for Feld to build a show format that doesn't depend on crush cars. And I want you to think about this. At this point, with a decade plus of no crushable objects, imagine trying to change the culture and actually bring them back. Now we're going to hit the main point of all of this: money. Crush cars aren't just cars. They are an entire operation. Finding the right cars, transporting them, prepping them by removing glass, handling fluids, blowing out the tires, building the obstacle, cleaning debris from the show, hauling the junk out afterwards, and disposing of it properly. And every part of that process has become more expensive. Junk car prices, labor, transportation, equipment, fuel, venue staffing, the venue itself, and insurance, just to name a few. Now the key part, which I think is really important. Us Monster Jam fans love to demand the old days back, but most of us would not want ticket prices to jump up enough to pay for the old school shows at scale. So Feld makes the business decision to create a show that is more repeatable and cheaper to run, which solves most of the operational pressure at once. And that's what wins in a corporate environment. Now I want to add, I don't think the fans are the main issue. However, I suspect higher ticket prices would be a larger issue than not having crushed cars, unfortunately. Personally, I don't think Feld is doing the most they could either. This is the same theme that I referenced in my previous video, that I think I already referenced, I may not have. Scalability beats soul in a corporate environment. So if crushable cars were once a cornerstone of Monster Jam, what replaced them? It is my opinion that skill and skill maneuvers replace them, and here is why. Feld realized they can keep the crowd excited with big wow skill moments that don't require sacrificing trucks, ripping through cars, or potentially rebuilding a totaled truck in 5 days, which ultimately saves money, time, and keeps everything flowing smoothly. You can clearly see it in a freestyle run. Back in the day, you'd have a truck ripping around the track, catching some sick air, and maybe hitting a slap wheelie right into a camper like that legendary Pastrana 199 clip. Now, you'll have a truck rip around for a minute or so, then throw a skill maneuver into their freestyle run, which in their defense can really provide some great moments, but the excitement of skill maneuvers took away that need for destruction. And destruction isn't the right word, I'd say unpredictability, which could absolutely lead to destruction, but I'm not out here advocating for the trucks to be yard sailed, all 12 of them every show. Alongside skill and skill maneuvers, crush cars were also replaced with bigger and more diverse dirt ramps and engineered obstacles. To continue the point, skill maneuvers didn't just replace cars because they work. They replace cars because they're controllable, much more predictable, and repeatable while still giving the fans the feeling of getting their money's worth. The stunts can be designed and practiced, and you can even build an entire track around them. A bicycle, a stoppie, a moonwalk, and yes, even a backflip. I'm probably going to get a ton of crap for saying this, but even a backflip are all engineered moments. They don't depend on a pile of scrap metal collapsing the right or wrong way. They don't risk destroying a truck mid-season, and they don't stall track setup or teardown. They're spectacular, but they're structured. That's the shift. When I was at the Orlando Monster Jam earlier this year, they mentioned that one of the drivers had been practicing that skill move all day the day before, which proves the point even more. These moments aren't spontaneous, they're rehearsed. Monster Jam moved from chaos-driven highlights to calculated execution. From let's give them a show to let's perform the show. And that fundamentally changes the feel of Monster Jam, even if the driver's skills are undeniable and better than the past. Just before we get to the solutions, I think there's a real clear divide in the fan base. One side is pretty appalled by the new show style, and it is actually pretty hard for them to watch because they feel like the sport has been sterilized. And the other side argues that modern cars aren't safe to crush the same way, and that a touring company running multiple shows simply can't source old vehicles at scale anymore, and actually just appreciates the show as it currently is. Both sides are correct. I think it's totally okay to long for that nostalgic, classic Monster Jam feel, but I think it's totally noble and awesome for you to say, hey, I like the show as it is. The skill maneuvers are actually really awesome. Evolution's evolution. Get over the car situation. I'm actually a pretty big proponent to that. OG fans miss crush cars, and crush cars provide a better show. But crush cars as we remember them do not exist at scale anymore, whether physically not being in the junkyard or logistically impossible. So is there a way to bring back that old school feel but in a reasonable way? As I've said, I hate complaining without offering fixes, so here are some solutions I'm pretty proud to present to you guys. Solution 1. One classic crush stack per show. Bring back one classic bus or car stack in the middle of the track with intention, building dirt heavily onto the vehicles to create a steep step up so trucks hop over rather than crush through. Using a contained, crushable centerpiece and designing it specifically to minimize shards and flying debris. Make it feel iconic again without turning it into a shrapnel artillery gun. Yeah, like imagine just in the middle of the course there being a double bus stack, a bunch of dirt pushed up onto the cars, and the guys are just launching over it. Wouldn't be exactly the same, but it would totally feel extremely nostalgic and provide for some sick moments. Solution number 2. Do more cars inside ramps. Monster Jam already does this by building crush cars into ramps in a contained and controlled way, so the solution isn't reinventing it, it's doing more of it. Making it visually obvious and turning it into a recognizable signature, because right now I don't think a lot of fans even realize they're there, which is part of the problem. Also, only having one of them feels like a total cop-out. Drop 4 of them on the track or one large centerpiece with 5 of them in a row, and I think old school fans would feel heard, and younger fans might buy into Monster Jam more than just coming once a year because their dad got them tickets. Solution number 3. Make crush cars a landing ramp. Instead of blowing through campers or semi-truck trailers, use crush cars as down ramps, landing zones, or controlled crush pads. It could give the crowd the destruction visual without the unpredictable launches that the crush cars can provide. Plus, the middle of the track is already built up to help soften the landings. It wouldn't be hard to arrange cars in, let's say, a 3 wide by 6 long manner, where the cars are buried into the dirt and set up to crush in a safer, more predictable way, which I really love that idea. Some of my favorite monster truck clips are when trucks land on the roofs of buses and they're like pillows to the trucks, cushioning the fall. Solution number 4, use already totaled and pre-stripped vehicles. This is a pretty practical solution I feel good about. Use vehicles that are already totaled from accidents and pre-stripped so the glass, hood, tailgate, or doors are potentially gone, which means less prep work, less risky debris, and less labor overall. Then just take a loader and crush the rest of the car to make them even and build dirt up around them. It won't feel exactly like the old days, but it would move the needle back toward what most fans are missing. Solution number 5, reuse cars from the year before. As I mentioned Jeep Beach does with the dirt, logs, and rocks, I'm suggesting we reuse the same crush cars at each event year after year so they become increasingly flattened over time, which would reduce the chance of parts flying off or the truck getting kicked in an unpredictable or unfavorable way, since the cars will turn into complete pancakes. Then, just like the dirt, bring them in for the show. Now procurement is a non-issue and storage would be cheap. You could literally store them at a junkyard in a pile. And I'm also suggesting that each venue has their own storage of pre-crushed cars that just get brought in for the show, so you're not having to put them on a semi-truck flatbed and drive them across the country. And then last but not least, this is probably the best idea, solution number 6. Make crushables a premium limited event. I've got to say, I think this is probably the best solution to this problem I have seen yet. If crush cars can't realistically return to every single weekly tour stop, then let's stop trying to force them into the regular tour schedule we have and instead turn them into a limited premium event. Create one dedicated tour or even a short run of, let's say, 4 shows that are all built entirely around real crushable objects. Market it as something special, something rare, something closer to the old days. And if you could find venues like the Atlanta Motor Speedway, it's already an outdoor venue, that would totally reduce risk even more, in my opinion. And then I have other ideas, like maybe even bring out old trucks like Bulldozer, Blue Thunder, or Black Stallion and do an old truck versus new truck showdown like they did with that Fire and Ice show. I think they did, I don't know exactly what it was, drop a comment below, but they did a show where there was like, some of the trucks had like green tires, some of the trucks had, it was like nitro versus ice, I don't know. But they do these like showdowns, and it would be dope if they did a new truck versus old truck showdown. Imagine a non-3D El Toro Loco versus a 3D El Toro Loco. That would be pretty sick. For this style of show, I'm suggesting tickets being more expensive and seating being pushed higher into the stadium to increase spectators' distance and safety. Barriers could be taller or reinforced. You could even bring in a netting system like in the NFL for field goals for the lowest rows so debris cannot hit the crowd. The entire environment could be engineered specifically for debris control and risk mitigation. That way you're not trying to make crush cars fit into a sanitized touring system. You're building the event around them. I'd be willing to bet a huge portion of fans would happily pay for both. The regular show for the polished, skill-driven spectacle, and then when it comes through their region, a separate Crash Madness style tour that celebrates the raw, destructive identity that built Monster Jam in the first place. This could even be reserved for something like the World Finals. Imagine an entire season building toward one event where the crushables come back in full force. Buses, cars, campers, you name it. Engineered safely but undeniably smashed, or should I say, yard sailed. That instantly restores identity without blowing up the entire model Feld has engineered to be successful in 2026. And it wouldn't be that much harder to charge a little more for the World Finals because it's already a premium event. I've got to be honest, if Feld pulled something like this off, I would defend them to the grave. It would prove they actually care about the roots of the sport and the identity that built it. They don't have to bring crush cars back to every single show, but restoring them in a limited, intentional way like this would go a long way for the sport of monster trucks and the brand of Monster Jam. So why don't monster trucks crush cars anymore? It simply isn't one reason. I think it's safe to say that modern car construction, supply limitations, venue restrictions, rising costs, ticket pricing pressures, liability concerns, and a corporate shift towards repeatable skill-based spectacle all played a role in crushable objects disappearing. I actually think it's a rather unintelligent argument to only say Feld is greedy. I do think Feld could be a lot more creative about protecting the spirit of the event before it fades even further than it already has over the last decade, and honestly, only time will tell if it's something they truly care about. To close things out, here's the final piece I want to leave you with. I'm disappointed that in the process of evolution, Monster Jam let go of one of the most iconic elements that helped build it to what it was in the first place. Imagine a Monster Jam event that brought back the greatest action from 2003 to 2014 and fused it with the precision and skill of today's drivers. I don't think any of us could truly fathom how unreal that spectacle would be or the positive ripple effect it could have across motorsports as a whole in terms of mainstream awareness, driving skill, mechanical innovation, and simply pushing the limits of what people believe is possible. Now seriously, I want to hear from you. Be honest, which one of my solutions sounds the best to you? Does anything in this video sound objectively wrong? If so, please drop a comment below and let me know. I'll be sure to reply to every comment just like the last video, which was so sick we got nearly 1,000 comments. I'm going to continue creating these opinionated, documentary-style, solution-providing videos, so if you enjoyed it, go down and subscribe. I'd love to have you here. It'll put us one step closer to getting that Brawler monster truck we all desperately need. I'm thinking 4-seater, so 3 fans can come along. That would be totally sick. So I guess this is thank you for watching yet another Brawler USA video, and I'll see you at a Monster Jam event very, very soon.